Joining me now, across America, our good friend Ross Eisenberg. Who's Ross Eisenberg? Come on, man. He's the Vice President of Energy, which we love, and Resources Policy at the National Association of Manufacturers. Now, what does that mean? That means jobs for Americans in America. Manufacturing jobs. My other favorite thing, right? Get rid of the international globalist slave trade network, and let's support the National Association of Manufacturers. Now, Eisenberg oversees NEM's energy and environmental policy work, and he has expertise in issues ranging from energy production to air and water quality, climate change, energy efficiency, all that good stuff. And he's fighting hard for us to get these pipelines. I want pipelines, roads, trains, and bridges. It all fits into the same thing. You need energy for all this stuff. Ross, good to have you, man.
Well, thank you for having me. That was a heck of an introduction. I need to tape that and put that in my bio or something like that. Thank you.
You know, I get excited having you guys because I want energy. I want pipelines. I want shale. I want coal. I want whatever it is. You can't move the country ahead and compete with the Chi-Coms, right, without energy. Now, let me just ask you something, Ross, right? China is building a coal plant a month. Why do you think they're doing that? Cheap energy, right? And then, you know, they're building pipelines all over the place. They don't have to go through all this nonsense that we do with this pipeline. Now we got another group of paid professional protesters protesting another pipeline in Virginia. What's the deal?
You know, we live in interesting times. I mean, despite other countries building out their infrastructure at a rapidly, much faster rate than us, we still have a competitive advantage when it comes to energy. I mean, that is the beauty of energy here in the U.S. We are uniquely situated. We've got everything. I mean, we've got hundreds of years supply of everything from coal to natural gas to oil to, we have growing renewables and plenty of nuclear. We have everything. It's an advantage for us in a country where there aren't too many policy advantages for manufacturers when you look at tax and trade and some of these other things. And so, but you got to get the infrastructure built. I mean, as you said, certainly on the public side, roads, bridges, we're crumbling, right? I mean, this is something that has been it's not a new problem. We get D's and F's on the infrastructure scorecard, and other countries just outpace us. Anybody who's been to an airport in another country realizes we're not too good here on that side. That requires money, and it requires some real big thinking. At the same time, on the private side, on the pipeline side, the stuff that I deal with, the money's there. We just need government to get out of the way. You look at places like North Dakota, where the Army Corps basically just sat on it for 4 months and then said, too bad, so sad. We know you've built 90% of this thing, but maybe you should move somewhere else. That's not how you do business. That's not how companies go into these projects. They understand there's rules of the road and they got to comply. But the ball just the goalposts keep getting moved on them. And so what we're optimistic about out of the new administration is, number one, he's made a lot of good overtures on infrastructure and on all kinds of infrastructure. We're thrilled about that. But we have a real opportunity here and a real need to build out our energy infrastructure. So power lines for these new power plants, pipelines for all the new gas that's coming from places like Pennsylvania and Ohio and Colorado. But we got to do it, right? It's got to get up, and it's got to get up now, and it'll have benefits across the economy. And so, we're optimistic. We're excited about the opportunities, but we want to keep the foot on the gas pedal here.
Ross, here's the bottom line. You can't revitalize American manufacturing without affordable energy, right? You can't do it. And what happens is why our manufacturing bases get hammered in America is because of all these rules and regulations and all this EPA nonsense. That's number one. The second thing is you got countries like the Chi-Coms that basically have all this cheap energy because they don't follow any international rules, any national rules, right? And then they subsidize their products and they dump them in the U.S. like steel, like aluminum, right? And then they put our manufacturers under, our jobs go away. You can't blame the people in the U.S. that need the steel or the aluminum. They buy it cheaper. I mean, they're in business to turn a profit. You can't blame them. But it all gets back to the fact that we don't have a consistent energy policy that says we're going to be energy efficient and we're going to find ways to deliver U.S. energy to areas that can spur manufacturing growth for them to be competitive. Am I right?
You hit the nail on the head. I mean, this is we need to have an adult conversation about energy. I mean, without question, and we haven't had one for a long, long, long time. And it is specifically what you're talking about. I mean, you look at you look at some of these energy-intensive industries, the real manufacturing, right? I mean, chemicals and plastics and steel and cement, and they're doing better because of energy. I mean, they've got tremendous opportunities primarily because of the shale gas and the renaissance that we're happening on that there. But there's a lot more that can be done, and they're getting bombarded with regulations. International competition, as you said, is fierce. Aluminum is a wonderful example of that. China is literally building more aluminum factories than the world needs. I mean, they're just doing it because they can, and they're oversupplying the market. And our guys here are really facing headwinds because of that. And so, we need to have and so ratcheting up the price of energy, availability of energy at a time when it's one of the few things that give our guys an advantage here seems like absolute madness. And so, building those pipelines gets you there. I mean, we have a tremendous need. We did a study on pipelines earlier in the year that basically said we're going to have a 40% surge in demand for natural gas over the next decade, and that's going to come from the power sector and manufacturing. I mean, literally those two sectors. And it's because we're growing. It's because we have a bigger energy demand here, and there's opportunities here for manufacturing. But if we don't get the infrastructure in place, then that's just not going to happen. It's going to stay put in places like Pennsylvania and Ohio. Those areas aren't going to be able to get it to market, and it's just going to stay there. And that's not really good for anybody. I mean, when you invest in manufacturing, you're investing in the economy, quite frankly. It has the highest job multiplier of any other sector. So, we heard loud and clear in this election that we want manufacturing in this country. My association, as you know, agrees. Building some of these pipelines, building this infrastructure is a phenomenal way to get it done. And like you said, I mean, it's a way to unleash our energy, advantage comparatively compared to just about anyone else in the world. If we want to have long-term energy advantage here, now's the time to get this stuff in place.
Well, that's exactly what we need to do. There's no question. We're going to be fired up about the Trump administration. I'm telling you, you're going to be pumped when this thing's over. But here's the thing. Let's get to the Dakota pipeline, okay? I mean, this is another thing. You just shake your head. You got, 98% of it done, right? And now you got some river, and they're saying, well, Native Americans own this spot. There's all these sit-ins and all these people there and protesters because they don't want to have the pipeline into ancient burial grounds or something. Yeah. So meantime, this entire project is just stalled. It's just stopped now. And, of course, Obama didn't do anything to continue it on. What happens with that?
Well, I mean, our hope is that the new president just greenlights this thing. And I don't think it's going to be, in terms of how it would actually happen. I think while we would love to see it just that day have a complete 180, I think it probably is going to take a little bit more time than that, but probably not too much more time. I mean, look, we're as frustrated as anybody else. I mean, this pipeline has a lot of my members as suppliers for it. So, I mean, they've been, hitching their business and their star to getting this thing done. And, I mean, what I think the most frustrating thing about this saga has been this wasn't something that just all of a sudden happened in September, right? I mean, I testified on behalf of this project in Des Moines, Iowa, about a year ago. And so this has been going on for a while. Mm-hmm. The time to reroute this project it's not now. It's not when it's 90-something% built. It was way, 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 way earlier than this. And so if you're a business and you're looking at, the government that has to permit your business and whether or not you want to take on a new infrastructure project, you look at what's going on in North Dakota and you get really, really scared. If you're building a house and all of a sudden you're about to walk in the door for your new house and the government says, you know what, why don't you move your house 2 blocks away? That's completely irrational, and that's how businesses are looking at what's going on in North Dakota right now. Completely irrational. The goalposts have been moved. We're just in a situation where the government, frankly, can't be trusted to do its job and approve some of these projects in a timely fashion. And certainly, we didn't want to see any violence. That's the worst possible thing that can happen here, and we're glad that it's staying relatively peaceful. But the government, the longer they've been sitting on this thing, the worse it's been getting. Just make a decision already. And so, this is something that could have been dealt with months ago. This is something that could have been dealt with years ago. It's not like it just all of a sudden happened. And so we're obviously very, very frustrated. We've called on the new president to fix this mess, and not just this mess, but all the messes. I mean, this has been like Keystone XL on fast forward. And we need to stop doing that, particularly given how much we need to get some of this infrastructure in place. This has been one of the worst legacies of this president is his inability to make a decision when it comes to coming up with permits for energy projects. We're hopeful that we're going to get a dramatic change of policy on not only this project, but every energy project around the country.
Ross, you're going to love President Trump. Let me tell you, you're really going to be fired up. And we're looking forward to his energy policies and reversing some of the crazy stuff going on. And you looked at who he named as his EPA director. I mean, you got to hand it to the guy. So he names as his new EPA director Scott Pruitt, who is the Attorney General in Oklahoma, who is suing the very agency that Trump nominated him to take over. I mean, it's a beautiful thing, Ross. It really
well,
is.
It's going to be different. I mean, buckle up. And there's really no other way to look at it. I mean,
he picks the guy that's
our members have been complaining about regulations in largely, but really EPA regulations. It's always their top thing when we pull them, and so someone needs to get the foot off the neck of regulated industries, and it sounds like he's going to be the one to do it.
Scott Pruitt has spent the last 8 years fighting Obama's EPA regulations in Oklahoma that he says is unconstitutional, and so he's got him in lawsuits and everything else, and now he's taking the agency over, man. Fasten your seatbelts. Change is coming. Ross, thanks for being with us, man.
Thanks so much for having me. Always a pleasure.